Hey everyone, so welcome back to My Rising Rose with me, Jack Morrigan. It's been really great over the last week or so to get back into these videos and see all the comments from all of you. It feels like there's lots of connections building, and as I've mentioned in previous videos, I think that's such an important thing for us to do as spiritually awakening people, to start forming these connections and bridges between one another. So that we can feel stronger and more supported in who we are and what we're doing. So it's lovely to see that. And I've also noticed that when I'm doing channeled videos with the dragons on this channel, they tend to get a lot more views than when it's me talking from my ordinary human perspective. And I was feeling a bit of resistance to that, and I was going to try and kind of push back about that, like, and kind of encourage all of you to watch some of the videos where I'm not channeling. And I came up with an idea this morning that actually kind of solves this problem, I think, and that's that I'm going to create another YouTube channel, which is where I will do the podcast, the Awakening Below podcast that I'm doing with my friend Oholomo. And also when I'm not channeling and I'm just sharing my own human perspective with you, which is important. You know, it's important that we're all able to interact with one another and learn from one another on the human level. And we shouldn't fall into a kind of trap where we see channeled beings as somehow superior to human beings. Like, we're working with those beings, we're equals. And we are all the same spirit, whether we're human or whether we're dragon or goddess or whatever it may be. So it's important that we find a balance between expanding up and channeling these beings and being connected with them and being ordinary and grounded in our humanity. And I feel like the message that I'm getting is that this channel, My Rising Rose, should remain only for channeled videos with the dragons and the goddesses. And I'm going to start a new channel, which will be dedicated to the more human side of things. And I'll, if it's not taken, I'm going to call that one Jack Morrigan. So that's my plan. So stay here if you want all the channel stuff, and then visit the other channel if you want the human side of things. And just while we're on the kind of update train, as many of you know, I'm going to be launching the Dragon Library in August. Things are going really well with switching over to the new website provider, so I can give you pre-recorded courses really easily. So that's going to launch in August. It's going to be a collection of pre-recorded, channeled short courses dedicated to specific themes. And we're going to start with ground, which will be via the red root chakra dragon, teaching us how to descend our roots down into the heart of the earth and form a direct communion, a direct union with the heart of Mother Earth. When most people think of grounding, they're thinking of what I like to call common grounding, which is basically where you take off your shoes and your socks and you walk around on the grass, you hug trees. And there's like scientific evidence that supports that this is like a real thing because of the way that DC current flows through the earth and our bodies, like that we can literally ground ourselves. You can also do this in the bath. It actually happens automatically for most people when they're in the bath, because the bath is grounded to the earth, or when you're in the shower, the same thing. And I channel a lot when I'm in the shower. And when I found this out, I was like, oh, that's probably why. It kind of makes it easier because the current moving through our bodies is kind of cleaner in a sense. But that's like common grounding, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. But the type of grounding that I'm talking about is union grounding. So union grounding is where your mind actually descends into the earth herself through the process of grounding. You follow the movement of gravity down through the soles of your feet and into the earth. And through that process, you're able to reunify your mind in a sense, your soul with the soul of the earth, Mother Earth. So many of us are pining for that genuine motherly connection, and one way to receive that is through this process of union grounding, and that will be led by Via, and we'll be releasing that in August. So pretty soon. I've got a lot of work to do, getting everything ready and making sure it's all like super professional and everything for all of you guys. So that's the plan immediately. But then in October, me and my friend Anna Oliveira, supported by my lovely partner Lola, are going to be leading a retreat in Glastonbury. And all the pieces are coming together for this. We've just booked a beautiful home that we're all going to be able to stay in. And we found some amazing caterers who are going to make it really like homely and welcoming for everybody. In fact, these caterers are only using locally sourced food from local farms around Glastonbury. And I was thinking about that, and I was like, hang on a second, that means that we will literally be eating Glastonbury. You know, we'll be eating the fruit of Glastonbury. That will be becoming a part of our bodies. And I feel like it's going to be an interesting and special retreat. I'm deliberately trying to make it different to the typical kind of retreats that I've seen before, because I really want it to be something relaxed and luxurious. Like, I think our bodies deserve a break, and oftentimes spiritual retreats are a place where the body just kind of gets thrown around and is expected to do all of this stuff in the name of some like spiritual advancement that's sort of seen as something outside of the body. And I'm like, that isn't how spirituality feels for me. Like, for me, the body is the place where all of this spiritual evolution happens. So we should treat it with respect. We should not be pushing it really hard, traveling all over the place while we're doing retreats or spiritual work. Like, let's be focused in one location, not have to travel too far, not overdo it. Like, give our bodies the time and space that they need to actually integrate the wisdom of these sacred places that we're visiting. Why not make it feel more like a holiday, that we leave feeling more refreshed than when we started? That's my aim. And that's what I really hope we're going to achieve. So that's from the 7th to the 11th of October. And then there's lots of things coming up over the next few years. It's all been dropping in lately. I've been having lots of insights into how things are going to go. So there'll be a new Dragon Medicine Live coming up, either next year or the year after. And we're going to be moving back and forth between offering live programs and then pre-recorded courses that will be sold in these different libraries. So with all of that in mind, I've got a plan for today, and it's based on a question actually that Lola asked me. And it's related to spiritual entities. And obviously spiritual entities can be good. They can be really positive and supportive, and they can also be pretty negative. If you've been around the spiritual scene for very long, you've probably run into people who seem kind of very like energetically off. Sometimes these are people who will be like going to retreats or events, and you may have met people like that there, like people who just seem very either very negative or like very kind of sort of like anxious and demanding. Like there's this kind of real sort of intensity, but not like in a good way, to some people, spiritual people. And that also includes some spiritual teachers and healers. And what I want to talk about today, and I'm going to channel, I'm going to be channeling probably Gorkoraeth. I assume he's like the entity dragon for sorting out that kind of stuff. So I'm going to most likely channel him through. As you know, I'm not always channeling the dragon that I expect to. I'm going to probably be channeling Gorkoraeth, and he's going to answer some questions about entities, how we can notice if there's like a negative entity that's affecting ourselves, or on how we can notice if there's a negative entity that's affecting others, and something that we can do about that. I'll see how much we can fit in. Obviously, we've got a very limited amount of time here, but let's see what he has to say, because I know that this is a topic that causes a lot of anxiety for people, and I understand that. This, it evokes a lot of things, this topic, because it's something that's really outside of our control, or it can feel like it's something that's outside of our control a lot of the time. And that's not a very nice feeling, like feeling that there might be some negative spiritual entity that can like kind of come at us and affect us negatively. Like, that doesn't feel good. And I understand that this is an anxiety provoking topic for many people. But it is something that we do need to talk about, because it is a real thing. But let's talk about it from like a really calm and grounded perspective, not kind of a very panicked, a real, like sense of urgency, like we absolutely have to sort this thing out right now. Let's just accept that these negative entities are just like viruses and bacteria out in the regular world, Every now and then we catch a cold, and we do what we need to do to get better. We try not to spread it to other people, and it's not the end of the world. And I think that's a good attitude to think, like, to apply to negative energies or negative entities. We don't need to see them as kind of something terrifying. They are a part of life, but they don't need to be something that keeps us up at night. So I'll bring through Gorkoraeth now. He'll answer these questions and give us some tips on what we can do to help keep us safe and help notice this in others as well, because I think that's really important, because I do see that in quite a lot of teachers and healers, that they're really taken over by some of these negative entities, and then they become, just like somebody with the flu, they just kind of spread it, and can often seem, to the inexperienced people, they can seem like very genuine spiritual teachers and healers, when to someone with a bit more experience, it's like, oh no, something's gone wrong here. I hope this person has the humility where they can seek help, but unfortunately probably not at the moment. So, but it's just a part of spiritual life that we all need to have a mature and grounded perspective on. So I'll channel through Gorkoraeth now, and he'll share some insights into it. Just opening this up so it's easy for him to use my body so that he can see what the question is. Otherwise it gets a bit weird. It's always strange when they're trying to kind of do technical things like through my body. Like, it's not the easiest. So I'm just doing that to keep it simple. Okay, I'm going to bring him through now. Gianalayo. Nianalayo. Nianalayo. Nianayo nur. Yanalayo. Kianayo. Nianayo. Narayu. So as usual, please bear with me for a moment. I'm just tuning myself in. As the Dragon Live members well know, we like to use mudras through Jack's body to help tune us in. These are hand mudras. It just means it's like a yoga posture for your hand. And you can think here of the hand very much like like a satellite dish. It's like a satellite dish. And as you move it in different positions, you're opening and closing different connections. You're aligning your satellite dish. Jack is aligning his satellite dish, or put better, I am aligning Jack's satellite dish so that it can receive my own frequencies more easily. So this is kind of what we're pointing to every time we come through, and we're tuning ourselves in. That's what we're saying. And from Jack's perspective, what he's experiencing right now is like an opening of his consciousness, an opening of his energy field. What he describes as like an opening of the ground beneath him, which is where I am. I'm in the ground beneath. And a sense of deeper connection with that ground, and some quite intense, sometimes, waves of energy moving up from the ground. It can be a little, it might take his mind a little time to kind of stabilize in that intensity. It's one of the reasons why we take a little while to tune in. And I just want to talk through this process with you. Of course, I am Gorkoraeth, but I'll give my full introduction in a moment. But I just want to talk this through to you literally as it's happening, because this transparency will aid some of you and help some of you understand what's actually going on within your own bodies and your own connections with beings like myself. And another aspect of what Jack's experiencing is a unification between himself and me. So he is aware, to some degree, to some level of clarity, that what I am fundamentally, the spirit, you could say, that I am, is the same spirit that he is. So we are the same being, and he knows that. He has that sense of recognition. So that's an expansion of unity consciousness into what I would call cosmic unity consciousness. That's kind of a point to elaborate on at a later time. For now, I just really wanted to mention to you what he's experiencing in his body and to share that with you, because I don't think that is often spoken about by channels, and every channel has their own unique way of this happening. So I want to share Jack's way with you, because for some of you, that will resonate and be helpful. So now, let me introduce myself. Also, while I was talking there, it was helping me to tune in, so it was a very useful little double win. So I am Gorkoraeth, Gorkoraeth, Black Dragon of the Underworld and Father of the Rising Rose. And I've come here today for this specific purpose of aiding and answering this question about negative entities, entity attachment. Why have I come through specifically to talk about that? Well, I'm the Black Dragon of the Underworld. Keeping the Underworld fresh and revitalized and healthy is my job. So any enlightened being of the dark or enlightened being of the underworld, their role is very much like an earthworm in the soil. The role of the earthworm in the soil is to keep moving, keep eating through debris. So you're eating through decaying matter so that the air and oxygen can flow through the soil more easily. You're also creating little holes through the soil which air can flow through, so the soil becomes more oxygenated and healthy. And so you're eating through decaying material, almost like sort of dead or dying material, and creating space through the soil. And those two things help keep it really healthy. So that's very much like what I do. I eat through what is decaying, and I create space. And I think some of you will be able to get that sense from me. And my hope is that within that you'll feel a sense of safety. Because, of course, two things that really do create safety is the removal of what's decaying, or we could say what is negative and unnecessary, and the creation of space, because space creates holding, creates a sense of peace, a sense of protection, sense like, oh, okay, the weight's kind of falling off my shoulders and everything feels okay, you know. So it's all of that stuff, like coming together. So that's a little introduction into me, who I am, what I do. But let me just revisit this question that Jack's lovely partner Lola asked. I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, but it's how do I spot entity attachment? How do I notice it? How can I get rid of it? And how do I spot it in others? Right? I'll say it again. How do I spot entity attachment? How do I notice it? How do I get rid of it? And how do I spot it in others? Right. So how do you see it in yourself? How do you see it in others? And what can you do about that? It's a good question. How do you see it in yourself? How do you see it in others? And how can you get rid of it? What can you do about it? Let's put it that way. What can you do about it? So just bear with me a second. I'm going to download the information that I need to answer this question into Jack's body and mind. So the first step in something like this is to first acknowledge the reality of this situation, as Jack was alluding to before I came in. These entities are real. And I don't say that in an attempt to frighten anyone, any more than a doctor would be attempting to frighten you by telling you that bacteria and viruses are real. It's just so that we're prepared. So these entities are real. And you can think of them a little bit like lost children. That's how I view them. And they're beings oftentimes, but not always, oftentimes of the dark. So they operate in a realm similar to my own, but where I'm operating in the enlightened dark, they are, you could say, operating in the unenlightened dark. So these are beings of the underworld, beings of the unseen, who have lost their way. They've become disconnected from spirit. They do not know their spirit. You could say they do not know God. Right? They have forgotten the God within. And so they have entered a kind of desperate state where they need to feed upon the negative emotions and actions of, well, anything. So they will attempt to attach themselves to human beings in order to manipulate that human being's experience into a more negative direction, because they can feed on that energy. I'm sure many of you will have heard about this before. This is relatively simple, but it is a real thing. It is a real thing. Now, the question I'm going to answer first is, how do you spot that in others? How do you spot that in other people? Well, when somebody is being afflicted by one of these, in a sense it's a possession, but that's like a very strong word, and in many ways I don't really want to go in that direction because I think it'll evoke the wrong kind of feeling in people. But in a sense it is a kind of possession, because what happens is the energy of the entity becomes infused with the energy of a person. And what happens is that person's mind then starts identifying with that energy. So it starts mistaking the energy of the entity for their own energy, usually on a subconscious level. So there could be shame, for example, that's a part of that, or there could be fear. So it could be the entity is deeply afraid of life and seeks power in order to reduce that fear, right? And it is filled with that energy of kind of fear and the desire for power. And then it projects that energy into a person, usually using some significant life event as an entry point. And that could be, it could be a tragic event, like something traumatic happening to that person. It could be through an intense experience. So it could be through a powerful psychedelic experience, for example, where the mind is opened wide. They use these kind of highly emotionally intense moments as entry points sometimes, not always, sometimes. So when that happens, the entity is projecting its own shame, fear into the human being. Why is it doing that? Well, because it has grown so accustomed to shame and fear that it's forgotten how to nourish itself with the light of its own being. It's forgotten that it can actually fully sustain itself with the light of its own being. And so it is projecting fear and shame into other beings, including humans, in order to harvest them for more shame and fear. There's a well-known phrase in the psychological community, which is depression loves itself. Depression loves itself. And the same can be true of any negative emotion, fear, shame. They, in a sense, they love themselves. They just want more of themselves. And they will kind of create these subtle schemes, in a way, in order to make that manifest. So this entity is kind of lost in its own shame, its own self-loathing, its own fear, which actually makes it quite a weak and pitiful being. It's something to have compassion for. So this is a really important part of this whole conversation, because it's easy to get lost in a sense of fear about these beings, because they seem kind of otherworldly and supernatural, and then assumed that they're very powerful. But that is not true. They are actually incredibly weak. It's their weakness that leads them to do what they do. They're not powerful beings in the slightest. You could say they are the weakest of all beings. If you've ever had an encounter with such a being, I know for some of you, you will be experienced astral travelers. Not for all of you, but this will be useful for all of you. If you ever encounter a being like this, and if you have encountered a being like this, you probably know, if you just tell it to leave, it will usually just leave. If you're able to be kind of calm, relatively calm within yourself. The only time this doesn't work is when they've got their hooks into you and they convince you that they're more powerful than you. But when you're in a place of your own power and you tell them to leave, they just will, because they don't actually have any power over you. The only power they have is in making you think that you are powerless to them. That's the only way that they can truly control you, because you are far more powerful than they are. But only by convincing you that you aren't do they have a hold over you. But they are actually quite weak and honestly pitiful beings. And I mean that in a compassionate sense. So we should have compassion for these beings. We can acknowledge that actually we are the powerful one. We are the one who is powerful in this dynamic. And that we actually have a heart that is open and can say, I'm sorry that you are so consumed by self-hatred and fear. I'm sorry that this happened to you. Yeah, I'm sad that this has happened to you. And be within like the shining of your own heart. But we're already going into the kind of the solution. So let's return to this kind of, how do you spot it in others? Well, one way that you can spot within a human being that they've had this kind of infiltration is that they will speak from the energy of that entity. They'll speak from that energy, that entity's energy, which will usually include an intense sense of urgency. Will often include that, an intense sense of urgency. So if you're seeing like a spiritual teacher or channeler or healer out there who is talking about some very fearful, scary things and talking about it with a really intense sense of urgency, as in, you must do X, Y, and Z because the X, Y, Z beings are doing these awful things, and it's very intense, it's very emotive. You can feel like it's kind of making you feel anxious and kind of putting pressure on you emotionally and energetically, and that you can feel that kind of coming out of them. Or it can even feel like a blast of intense energy when it's coming out of especially when it's coming out of a healer or someone who has some level of spiritual awareness. That's a sign that they've been infected. It's a little bit like a sneeze when you've got a cold, right? It's that intense blast of like, whoa. And it's not very pleasant, much like if somebody sneezed on you. It's not very nice. It's like, ugh, whoa. And if you're inexperienced and this person is acting like they are really experienced, you may feel an inner pressure to bypass your own natural instinct to be a bit grossed out by this. And instead go, well, that feels a bit weird, but maybe that's because I'm doing something wrong. You might turn it on yourself when your natural instinct is actually right, that this person is actually in a bit of they're a bit sick right now, and they just coughed on you, and that wasn't very nice. But they're telling you that they're not coughing on you, and actually you're the one who's sick, and you're like, well, I don't actually feel that sick, but if they're saying it, maybe I am, and it can get very confusing. But one of the ways to understand, and a kind of red flag that you can look out for, is a really intense sense of urgency. And the intense urgency is coming from fear. So it's a real fear, and there may even be like a kind of fiery anger feeling in it. And that's because this being, the entity that's actually using this person, is desperate for food. And it is trying to spread that desperation and fear and anger and hatred and self-loathing and all of these things. It's trying to spread it through that person so that it can eat because it's hungry. And it's not its fault. It's confused. It lost its way a long time ago. And it doesn't understand that there are better ways for it to find nourishment. So we don't need to be kind of aggressive towards these negative entities. They're like an orphan child who is, misbehaving. It's like, well, okay, the way that this child is behaving is wrong. Maybe they pushed another child or something, and we can say, like, that wasn't the right way to behave. But I understand why you're behaving that way. Because you're an orphan, you've gone through some really difficult times, and I'm really sorry about that. And so these entities are very similar. They are orphans of God. So we don't need to see them as evil. They're not. They're not. Any being that had gone through what they've gone through would be behaving in similar ways. So they're not evil, but they are behaving in ways that cause themselves and others harm, and that needs to be addressed. Right? You can tell that I'm the father of the rising rose now, I think. So one red flag, a really, really useful red flag, is a sense of urgency. Now, that's not to say that always when somebody has a sense of urgency with things, that it's always an entity attachment was always wrong. But you use it as a flag to guide you and look at the frequency, right? So if somebody is, we'll use like a spiritual channel as an example. Someone is a spiritual channel and 90% of what they're sharing is pretty calm and grounded, but there's about 10% that contains kind of more of a sense of urgency. That's okay, right? Because it's not very frequent. And sometimes that kind of impulse to act is useful, but only in small quantities. Now, if you compare that to somebody where 50% of their message is containing this kind of like intense urgency, that's quite a different situation. That's somebody who may be under the influence of some kind of negative entity, because having 50% of your message be filled with a fearful need to act is a lot. Now, if you're going into the territory where you're going up to around 80% or even higher, that's almost certain that that person is under the influence of a negative entity, and quite a bad one at this point. So you can use frequency of fearful messaging to guide whether or not someone has been afflicted by this. What do you do in that situation? Well, let's say you're watching somebody on YouTube and this is how they are. Just stop watching. There's a very simple solution. Very simple solution. You don't have to pay attention to anybody that you don't want to pay attention to. And another sign that you can look for is if they're guilt tripping you to watch, like making it seem like you have to watch, like something terrible is going to happen to you if you don't. Like if you stop watching, something bad's going to happen to you. That's another red flag, because any being that's coming through who has good intentions doesn't want to control you. Like I'm sharing this with you now. I don't want to control you. If you don't want to watch this, please exercise your divine sovereign right and do not watch this. I do not wish to have any control over you. I do not wish to have any power over you. Please if you are giving away any of your power to me, I give it back to you. I do not want it. I want you to be in your power. I have come here to help you be in your power. I do not want it. I do not want it. I can say that with absolute clarity because I'm in my power. So why on earth would I need yours? And this is something that you will not find in one of those entities. They will always want your power because that's what they're hungry for. And if we move away from kind of YouTube videos for a moment and go more into the direction of cults, then that is very, very much what is happening in those places. Usually the leader is completely taken over by a negative entity who is siphoning the power of all the followers into itself in order to feed. So I just want to make it very clear that I in no way want your power, because it's actually an act of powerlessness to seek the power of others. So I would not be an empowered being if I sought your power. For true power only arises within oneself. Right, and you can probably feel that shining out of me now. I'm kind of strengthening the signal of that to move it through Jack's body so that you can feel it. Right, that's just my own, that's the power of our own shared being that's shining. So what can you do with the YouTube situation? You can just turn it off. You don't have to give your power to anyone, including me, including Jack, including any of the beings that come through here. You want to turn it off, turn it off. You never have to come back. That pressure is never upon you. No, you're always welcome, but you never have to be here. And that's the simplest solution with YouTube. And if you're feeling a pressure, you can just block that person. Easy, super easy, super easy. Now let's say it's a little bit different. Like maybe you're in like some kind of spiritual community, like an online community, like a Facebook group or WhatsApp group or something. And there's someone in there that's that you feel could be under the influence of some kind of negative entity. Compassion. Compassion. And wisdom, right? These are the two things that will serve you incredibly well in this situation. Start with compassion. Start by thinking, okay, something has happened to this person that has led them to become under the influence of a negative entity. I believe that that's what's happening, and I have the wisdom to see that maybe I'm wrong, but I do believe it at the moment, but I have compassion for them. Now that will really help you to not get sucked into a conflict, because the entity that's within them will want a conflict. So let's say there's someone, they're very outspoken in some spiritual online group that you're a part of. They're spreading a lot of fearful messages. You don't like it, it doesn't sit well with you, you feel it's having a negative influence on the group. What do? You compassionately call out what's happening and offer alternatives. You don't go in for the attack. Right? So you don't say, you're infected with an entity. I saw this video, it was talking about how to spot someone who's got an entity and you've got one. Don't do that. Don't do that. That won't serve you or them or the group. You know, that's actually an entry point for more entities to join the fray because they love that stuff. They love it. If you've ever watched The Lord of the Rings, there's a moment in the Fellowship of the Ring where they're all gathered around the One Ring. All of these different beings from Middle-earth have gathered because the One Ring has been found. The One Ring is like this entry point that Sauron is using to spread evil throughout the world. And they're trying to decide what to do. And they start arguing with one another. And you see like the ring is enjoying that. And you see like Sauron's will is spreading through their conflict and fueling the conflict and enjoying it, you know. And there's something similar that can happen with negative entities affecting a group. So just take a step back. It may be evoking a sense of anger or fear, the way that this person's behaving. Give yourself a moment to be with those emotions. Let them flow through your body. Don't let them overpower you so that you act in an aggressive way. Instead, just use wisdom to offer a counter perspective, a different perspective. Look at it differently. Like, oh, okay, I can see that you're saying this, this, and this. I disagree with that. And I see it like this, this, and this. And you can just kind of put that out there and just kind of let that be there. Now, the chances are, but if someone is under the influence of such an entity, they will respond in a very hostile way to a very reasonable message. Now that will help others to see that something's not quite right with that person. And usually they will be capable of revealing themselves and actually doing it in such a way that they lose credibility in the group if they are truly under the influence of such a being. Because they won't be acting with love and wisdom, and it will become more and more obvious the more they are challenged from a sense of peace. So when you're challenging someone from a sense of inner peace, from wisdom, from love, from compassion, the entity will not be able to stand that. Because you're actually showing the entity everything that it's lost. You're showing the entity, in a sense, and the energy of the divine, which in its heart of hearts, it longs for more than anything else. But it feels that it cannot attain this thing that, sadly, it actually already has, but it just doesn't know. And because of that, it will be more likely to lash out at you. And your role in that situation is just to be calm, to understand what's happening, that this being is in pain. It's in pain, and it's using this human to express its pain, and just be there with it for a moment. Just like a child whose ice cream just fell on the floor and it thinks the world has ended, you know, and it's kicking and screaming and crying, and you just hold it. Now, I'm not saying that you should put yourself in harm's way, but I'm saying that this is a good example because we're online, so there's no chance of actual physical altercations, and you can just kind of energetically have a space that sends love to this person and to the being that is influencing it. And it's possible that there can be moments of total transformation under such circumstances. It's possible that a few things could happen. One is that your wisdom and compassion could trigger an awakening of the same wisdom and passion inside of that human being, and the entity is cast out. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that the entity amplifies itself through that person in an attempt to kind of oppose you, to silence you and to dim the light that you're sharing with it, that it's kind of being blinded by at the moment. When it does so, it will reveal its ugly side. And if you're in a group setting, everybody will see, which can make it help. That's a good thing for the group, because then that voice which was spreading fear, its credibility is reduced. It's a very good thing for the group. That may become so frustrating for the entity and for the human being it's controlling that they leave the group. That's a possibility. If they can't control the group, they may just leave, probably projecting a lot of stuff onto you and the group as it does so, blaming you, telling you that you're a bad person, all of these things. And your role is just to not take any of that in, to understand what's happening. This person is under the influence of this being. They're in a bad way. We have compassion for them. Not in a condescending way, not in a I am this better spiritual person kind of way, because that's its own kind of entity, but in just a grounded understanding of what is happening. It's like, this is painful and it's sad and I wish this wasn't happening, but it is, and I understand why, and here it is. This is for the best of everyone. Maybe this person needs to leave. If they're bringing that kind of energy into the group, it's best for the group. Okay, we can move on. It's also possible, not only that the human being has a kind of awakening of divinity within itself, within themselves, which casts the entity out, but it's also possible that that awakening is so strong that it actually spreads into the negative entity. So don't think of negative entities as a kind of as if they never change. They're constantly changing. They're constantly changing. Every day, there are many of these negative entities that have epiphanies and transform and become awakened, enlightened entities of the dark, of the underworld, who are in a sense my children. So please don't think badly of them or think that they're incapable of change and evolution. They are on a path of growth and evolution just as you and I. So it is possible that your wisdom and compassion could be so potent that it even awakens them, that they remember the divine within themselves, that they repent. And you see this all the time in your movies, right? You see it all the time in movies, in sci-fi and fantasy movies, where there's like someone of faith whose heart is so pure that they are like a beacon of light in the dark, and that malevolent forces come in and try and affect them, and they just turn away. And this person has no weapon, they have no armor, but they have their heart. And when that becomes so strong, you can transform the forces of the unenlightened dark into the enlightened dark. And such beings, I can assure you, are deeply loyal to those who have aided them, and would probably become your greatest guardian and protector, because you are the one who saved them from themselves. And there's something about the beings of the dark, I'm not sure entirely why, but there's a sense of loyalty that we have, which is very, very strong. And that kind of intensity with which the unenlightened beings of the dark attach to people then becomes the intensity of protection, true protection, not overbearing and controlling, but true, welcoming freedom, honoring the sovereignty of you and all beings. In many ways, what is needed in humanity is this transformation of negative beings that are kind of like a disease that is spread through the psyche of the world. They're like lost ghosts, orphaned children who are dragging down the energy of the earth and creating a shroud of darkness that separates the earth from the living cosmos that we all are. In little moments of wisdom and love, you yourself can play a significant role in the evolution of such beings, which can and will create cascades of love and wisdom so potent that they will free the earth herself to become reunified with the cosmos that we all are. This is inevitable and will be the way. You will play your parts as and when you're meant to. Please don't take this as a pressure. It is not on your shoulders to be eternally wise and loving in all instances, to never lose yourself. It is also not upon you to fix every single human being who has an entity attachment, or indeed every negative entity themselves. That is not your burden to carry. But there will be moments when you're given an opportunity to step into wisdom and love. And there will be moments when you choose it and you have a positive and wonderful influence on yourself, on them, on the group you're a part of, and reaching wider into the spiritual, and I mean spiritual being community that exists alongside humanity. I think we've managed to cover some very useful ground here and put a context into entity work that is really needed, which is the context of wisdom and love, not only for yourself, not only for the person, but for the entity themselves. Operating from this way, with ever-growing discernment and compassion, you will become a force for unity and harmony in this currently rather discordant world. Thank you all so much for your time. It's been wonderful to come here. There's more to this question that I haven't answered, which I hope I'll answer in future videos. But for now, I just want to thank you and hope you receive what I share with you here with the love and the wisdom that it comes from. Thank you all so much. I'll see you again soon.